Okay, hey, everybody seeing the screen now?
Yes.
So types of notes um, is a big deal, and so we have different notes for different purposes throughout the program. So we have notes on records, we have line notes, we have documents, internal notes, and another one I thought of after the fact of after creating this slide was the process manual, which is another form of kind of putting notes on things. So let me switch over to the program. Can you see the program screen? Okay, good. Up in the window, it's saying what you can see. So under a sales order, when we open up a sales order, there is a comments tab, and these are the order notes, and it's not to a specific line item, it's to the whole order. It could be related to the shipping, it could be anything. And so it's on the entire record for the sales order. It typically will print on things. Some can choose whether those notes print or not. But those notes have to do with the whole entire order. Where another type of notes that we have down here is the line notes. And I'm sure most of you use this, but this is a note that is specific to the line item. And maybe you only have one item on the sales order. That's okay. This is going to put the note right next to the line, right below the line typically. And so it could be specific, maybe further specifications or informations related to the item on the order as far as that goes. So, and if you note here, it gives a little capital letter on notes there. And so that just is an indicator as to, hey, there is something there on the line notes. Well, then this button down here in the lower left-hand corner, this is the internal notes button. If you hover over it, it'll actually say internal notes. If you click on that button, it pops up a screen and related to internal notes and it's filtered to this specific sales order. So you can see up here, it's related sales order S116. It is the internal notes specific to this. Well, right now it is blank, just as we use in other areas of the program. There's the blue bar so that we can do active load all. In this case, there's still no notes, so it's going to filter those notes sometimes if they have been flagged as completed. So in here, once I've added it, I can do a new. Note that it does assign it to my user when I say new. So that's automatic. It assigns, it knows who you are, and that's an important type of a distinction. Then it has a spot to pick down the types of notes. And so, we can pick that from a drop-down list. And then we have the subject, and we can put whatever we want here as a short subject. And then we have the kind of memo or a large block of text can be typed, the detail of the note that we want. And so at this point, you can leave this screen. Notice how it kind of wraps that detail to the next line. And we can close this screen and it saves it. And we can close the sales order, and then we can reopen that sales order. And it now is turned blue in the lower left-hand corner. And that's just like the letter A type thing to designate, to say there is a note here. And so as to catch your attention or just informationally to say, hey, oh, there's a note there. So without having to open the note, I can see those notes. Now, something else popped up here, and I'm going to come back to this, but it popped up with reminders of Claire, or for Claire, and that is another function of these internal notes, is if you assign the due date to the internal note and it is not flagged as completed, you have not checked the box as completed, then it will pop up as a reminder. So again, that was one of those functions we wanted the system to do, is to pop up for people to act as reminders. So I'm going to close that briefly. We'll come back to that. So if I come back to this sales order, now it sees that internal note. One thing that is different on internal notes versus the comments or the notes of the order is multiple people can contribute to this. So if Larry was in here or Daniel was in here, if they press new, we could see multiple people's information, and it would just add records to the list so that you could have individual records from different people all related to the same order. And that's one thing that we'll talk about is whether you're set up as an administrator or not. So if you're a notes administrator, you can edit other people's. If you're not an administrator, we can protect the notes. And one way of doing that is say, hey, you don't have to edit my note. You can just append and add a new note to add more notes to the system. So when we're looking at here where it's filtered this note screen here to be for this specific sales order, you know, it's brought it up from me because I created it, but it could have listed any number of other users' notes related to this sales order. So that's important, just especially if I took the day off, Daniel took the call, he put a note in on that customer. Then when I'm going in to look at those notes, I can see other people's notes as well. And our intent with this wrap line here is so that you don't have to click on the edit, the A button here to see what the notes are, so that you can see that detailed information. I'm going to stop here for just a second, flip back to our presentation. And so I don't know if let me see if that makes sense as to everybody, the different type of notes. Does anybody have any questions on the different types of notes that are in our system?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I use internal notes all the time, but I didn't know you could put in a due date as a reminder. So if we do that and it's not complete, you said a reminder will pop up. Do you have to go into that sales order for the reminder to pop up?
No, you do not. It is all based on your user. And so I'll go into an example of that in a bit. So great question. Anybody else on types of notes that we have in our system?
I have a question on the line notes in the sales order. Are those notes specific to that sales order line item? Like, is that note kept with the item, or is that just a note that you can put in while you're making the sales order?
It's not kept with the item for future. It is attached to that line for that sales order. There is some functionality you may have run into both in sales orders and in purchase orders where it will copy the item notes. You know, let me flip on the screen. It will copy, you know, from over here under inventory items, and then we've got the particular item. It will copy the notes from this item here into the sales order line notes. So depending on the settings you have, you may see this kind of information being copied into the line note, but it's intended to copy and to be edited so that you can put in specifics. One
so it's
example
per
today,
sales order.
Per like sales order, correct.
It's specifically for that sales order. Okay.
Correct. So you edit it particular for that order, but it won't save it to the item in the future. It's more to be saved for that in the future. But it's still something that will typically print on your documentation. So that's, remember, a big difference where the comments or the line notes, those usually print on documents and or forms, where the internal notes do not print on things for the most part.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on types of notes in the system? Great. I'll keep going. So internal notes, we use the word internal very specifically. I know one of the hazards of me creating a lot of the software is you have to put up with what I called it. Sorry. And sometimes I do it right. Sometimes I could have done better. But the internal notes was chosen specifically on purpose. And just for the sake of saying, hey, we don't want to share this, meaning we don't want to print it. We may want it to be confidential. We can put on a note to an internal note that maybe is critical of that vendor or to that customer or how it was handled, but so we want to share it internally, but we don't want it to be publicized or printed on things. So that's a big distinction with the internal notes and how you can create multiple records per the activity. So that's one specific. On
Hey,
the screen.
Claire, sorry. Betsy had a question, and I thought that it was going to stay on my screen, but it disappeared, so I didn't quite catch it. So, Betsy,
I can see it.
okay.
Yes, you can set, Betsy, you can set reminders for yourself, and I'll show you an example of that just a bit. So you can set up reminders for yourself and for others. That's kind of the tricky part. And I know one of our customers, that's a big thing, is the old, I'll make up things for other people to do. I always like that. As far as the fields or the information that goes with an internal note, you have the created date, again, that defaults, the user that created it, that defaults to you, whoever created it. The type of note, that's a drop down for you to categorize or to organize things. Priority, that's again for just some kind of organizational method that you want to use. Remember, like with any of our screens, if you're not going to use, let's say, the priority column, feel free to hide that column. So there's also completed. That was the one that Tammy asked about. The due date, if that's filled in, then it will keep popping up as the reminders, and I'll show you an example in just a bit, until you check the completed box. So, or canceled. So if it's been completed or canceled, it kind of will not continue popping up for you as far as that goes. Date finished, again, you can assign that to inform yourself or others as to when that was completed. And then we already talked about the subject and the note, the due date, due time. Now, due time, I would like some feedback from people. Has anybody that's used internal notes used the time field? Because I'm thinking about eliminating the time due. So from the standpoint, the fields, let me flip back to the screen. So one person said they do not on the time. So that's good feedback. Again, we always appreciate your feedback on stuff like that. So when we're looking at the reminders fields here is due date, time, and there's a bunch of link fields, and I'll give you examples of those in a bit. There's also the link description. Sometimes that'll tell you what the purchase order number is, what the customer is. It gives the last modified, and then the assigned to is, as Betsy brought up, the issue that it can be not just could be your internal note, it could be assigned to other people. So be it you could create it and assign it to somebody else. You may or may not have used that function. You kind of have to be enabled on your security to do that. And then there's some other options with that assigned to is remind creator. So meaning if you set a due date, will it pop up on who created it in addition to who it's assigned to? And then there's, do you want to inform the creator that it was complete? So that just a feedback loop. So those additional fields, like these 3 fields here, if you're not going to assign tasks to other people, I would hide these 3 columns of your grid. And remember, you can just do that over here and then do your screen settings to save current if you're not making use of that. So then we have the company. Again, that's just linking it. So if it's a vendor or a customer, it'll fill this in just to tell you what the customer's name is. And then there's an additional feature here that many people may not know. A few years ago, we added documents because people said, you know, I created an internal note, but I don't want it on the documents of the item. There's actually, it's a little bit hidden here. You can click on a 3-dot button and that opens up an internal note document tab, which is very similar to the documents tab you have under items or sales orders or customs. And literally you can, you know, go do the grab a, you know, a document over here and you can come back and you can paste it and then add it to that internal note. So whether it's a PDF or some kind of other documentation you want to add to that internal note, great. You can do that, and all it does is it tells you true or false over here to know whether to go look to see if there's a document attached to it. So you can, it's this little 3 dots called an ellipse button. If you click on that, that's what pops up the internal note as far as documents attaching. So that's something you may not have used and may not have known it existed. You know, sometimes people will actually just cut and paste a huge chunk of email into the note here. That's fine, just to copy the text, things like that. So those are the different columns or the fields. Let me see if I didn't have any showing that I didn't talk about. These ID fields, you all know those. If you've worked in our system, those are kind of the behind the scenes that they end with ID, and that's for us to track stuff down. But that's any questions on the columns or the fields or the information that you can attach in the internal note. I'm going to keep going. If you have a question, I have to compliment. How do you link? It was Mike's question, and the one thing here is depending on what screen you're in, depends on how you link. And so I'll show an example of that. So let me show you that. So back to our sales order, when I was on that and I hit new, it creates the link by where the note was created from. So 99% of this is where you hit the note button from. So if I come over to an inventory item, you know, it's going to create a different link when I'm on an item and I open up a particular item and I hit the notes button here, it's going to have the link. This is an existing note and it's linked to this item itself. And if I hit new here, no, it automatically fills in that it's IT for item link and this is the item that it's doing it for. And then So that's the main purpose on how you link, is by where you created the note. Any other questions on that?
Hey
Okay.
Claire, can you, sorry, can you make a note in your quality module that you would then link the same way? So you had
Yeah.
a say you have to inspect the first 10 parts in a box or something because you had a quality issue with a shipment, and so you did it through your nonconformance or CA Kappa.
Mm-hmm. So you can do it almost every screen. I challenge people to find a place where I don't give you an option to create an internal note. Later down here in the presentation, I'll get to, there's like 30 different places that you can link. So yes, almost all the options under the quality module, you can say, internal note, or you hit the notes button and you can link it. Yeah, Mike, it's just to know where it was created from, but it also gives you options. It's informational, but it's also gives you some powers of the right click. And so everybody should try right clicking if you haven't in the program. When I'm on an internal note, let's say from this general screen or from the thing, you can open linked form from the internal note. So it gives me some functionality when I'm in the reminders function or I'm looking at an internal note. It allows me to do a right click and open the source from where that internal note was created. So yes, it's for to know where it was created and also to be able to right click on it. So let me go back to our presentation part. So purpose, there's tons of different purposes. Yeah, that's kind of really where you define it, but really it can be the reminder, it can be just informational, it can, it's kind of what you make of it. It's really simple. How we created it as to how to use it, I think is pretty simple, but it can be pretty powerful. Anybody have any examples of how they've used it that they'd be willing to share?
I use it for a lot of different things. I use it to remind myself, this is kind of petty, but birthdays. I use it right from the payroll, from the employee list. So it reminds me a few days before somebody's birthday, and that's very helpful that way. But we use notes from anything from when a customer calls us and says the payment's on the way. I make a note on the invoice so we know last time that we contacted that person. I use notes for at the beginning of the month, things that I have to do on the beginning of the month. I make notes for that as well, for all of those things that I have to do. So I use notes on a regular basis.
Right. Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, Claire, we've used ours, which really helps out when we get a sales order and we have to contact the customer to find out new drawings and stuff like that. We can actually have a log going of how many times we called them or emailed them and no response. And that way, everyone in the system, they say, why hasn't this moved? They can easily go in and look at the notes on that item and say, oh, we've emailed them 5-6 times in the last 2 months and no one's answering. So it lets everyone in the whole shop that has access able to know what's going on with that part. And it's not just sitting somewhere.
Yeah, and that's a great example. I mean, harking back to my first career job in a welding shop, and the guy handed me it. This is largely before the PCs was. I had a notepad. I had to record every conversation I had with both customer and vendor, and those kind of informational things becomes very handy when you can say, I talked to so-and-so on this date about this topic, and this is what they told me. Nowadays, we have email for a lot of that, and so we may not need it as much for that, but there are times where you can just show the dialogue back and forth, and especially if you can see multiple people's dialogue, not just your own. And again, that's one of those benefits of having it within the system, not maybe in Outlook, and it's also shared across the platform, and you can see multiple people's notes. Betsy says we use them when entering sales orders to create the MOs. Is that just kind of a reminder, Betsy, or is that just do you guys do it where it's delegated or assigned to someone? We'll assume she says yes before she types it in. Here's the screen that I'm showing now is where linked. Now, so here's the 30 plus places that you can create an internal note. Oh, Betsy did come back and say it was assigned to the production planner, so that it's giving them a heads up. Hey, this is ready to be done. So yeah, it can be used for internal communication between people as to, like Mike was saying, the status of something or where we're at. So here's all the different places. I won't read these all, but there's a ton of places that we allow you to do it to record this information. And remember, it's organized or assigned to all these places, customer, and it's also assigned to who created it and potentially who it was assigned to as well. Setup. Couple things to do, or a few things to do when you're trying to use internal notes. Number one, users. So, that's pretty, obvious, where you just need to have your users, because for each user, it's going to give it, that it's more important when you're assigning it that they have to have a user as well. So, there could be a potential where you're assigning it to somebody that's maybe not in the system all the time. They still need a user's setup. Another one is note types, and there's a few that come with the system, but so when I was talking about users, this is the general security stuff, and when we look at the notes, there's security options for it. There's also one other important piece of information, and that's partly the timers. Okay, and so in here, this reminders timer is used for internal notes. So if you're not getting the reminders to pop up for your user, this is a good thing to double check that there is a time amount. It's also very important not to set it at too immediate a time or too short of a time period, because it becomes annoying that reminders will pop up from time to time. So this is one of the things that you want to set here per user is the reminders time, and that's the internal notes reminders time under the user. And the other setup, so here's the reminders. So here's an example. If that due date was filled in and the date is equal or past, so this one was due on the 4th and this was due on the 3rd, today we're on the 5th, so it's popping it up and it's showing the ones that are either for myself or that somebody else assigned. So you can see the CDR assigned Claire an internal note. So that's what this first line was. It was actually created by somebody else and it was assigned. So if we come over here, it was assigned to Claire. And then again, you can do the remind creator, those kind of things. Now to clear it, remember, I can put in the completed and the finished. You see how the finished populated automatically when I hit the completed. When I do that, then that line will not show up on my reminders the next time the reminders pop up. One point of note, if you're want to update something you can change the due date and move it out as well. So you could say, well, it was due on the 4th, or down here on this scenario, it was due on the 3rd. I'm going to move it to the 6th because I've already seen it today. I'm not going to get a chance to do a follow-up call to this person today. So I'm going to move the due date out a day just to avoid it popping up every 10 minutes or however many times that it needs to do that. So you can change those so that it comes through that way. So did I answer somebody's earlier question on how the reminders work? I think that was Tammy's question. Are we good, Tammy?
As long as the system is open and you're logged in, the reminders will pop
Correct.
up. Like, let's
Correct.
say I put in 10 minutes in the timer every 10 minutes.
Correct, exactly. So
Thank
that's the whole function, as to get the reminders to pop up, is having the due date and then having the time set on your user for that to work. Okay. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. So notifier is, oh, I was getting to note types. I got off topic on that one. Let me come back to that. So note types under defaults, note types. These are user defined, so each of your companies can create something unique to themselves where they, that you can put information in, you can call it whatever you want. You're just populating a drop-down list is basically what you're using it for. So this is one of those mode forms where you come in here and hit new, and you can put, you know, reminder, you know, or something, if you wanted, if I can just type, keyboard, there we go. So all you're doing is adding to the drop-down list. And so I would recommend that you have a few of them, but these can be very specific to you and your company then, is why we let that be a defined list for you. So that's that drop-down list. Another thing on the setup, besides the user, is called notifier. And so that's under here, notifier list. This is a way that the internal note can be created semi-automatically. So there's, like, one of our customers I'm visiting next week in the Tri-Cities, they had to set up this one for a drawing change. And an example for that is underneath the item, if we go to the items list, I open up that particular item and I go to the drawings list here, I can right click and say notify drawing update. And so there's an assignment there. And so just like Betsy was talking about, they assign it to the production planner. This was a way for us to automate or semi-automate it. There's another example that we give underneath the notifier list, and that is the AR statements. So if you email out statements, if we set this up, it will create a internal note that is assigned to the customer so that you have some record of saying, and this one's more automatic, where it'll actually insert an internal note into that customer to say, we sent a statement on this date via email. So I can look at all internal notes here, and you'll see an example of one of these here. If I just get to it. Here's the drawing notifier that I was talking about. It automatically created this one and said that for somebody to do something. And then maybe I deleted it. So, but the internal, if you do the statements, it'll create one for that as well. So that's just one way where most of the internal notes are created with the notes button. This is just a little more of an automated way to do it. And we're actually looking for input from y'all. is to other ways that we can utilize that. Maybe you can say, hey, it'd be great if you gave me a right click, or if you gave me where it automatically inserted a internal note when this event happens. So just let me know on that. Keep going. So we have the notifier. There's a few options under company options as to settings on that, and that's under the defaults, your company, as far as when we look at the defaults, your company, there's some settings under here that have to do with so prompt for copying notes, set incomplete, show customer internal notes. This one happens for people sometimes when they're entering sales orders. Some customer had us add this. And if it annoys you, you just come in here to uncheck it, to turn it off so it doesn't pop up with internal notes each time. But some people like to see that rather than just the customer's notes. So that's another setting to just change how those notes are used. So that's for setup. Potential uses, we've already been given a couple good examples. I like Lisa mentioned the AR collections, a promise check. Hey, that's a great one to say, hey, I'll get you a payment on this day. You can literally attach an internal note to that particular AR invoice to say customer promise check on such and such date. Maybe you date it a few days after to allow for mail. And then if you say that due date, it'll pop up on your screen. And then remember, it will give you the option to right click to go to that invoice to see if the payment was received. So that's one example. History, why something's changed. It's good for internal purposes. You can just create it. Doesn't have to have a due date. It's just kind of a history of things. Delegate, we talked about how Betsy had used it to let the production person know to do something. So that's a good way to assign tasks to other people. Follow up, remember that the whole genesis of this was the app database, was to say, hey, I need to follow up with this sales customer and things like that. So you can attach notes to contacts and or to customers, to vendors, or to vendor contacts. So I can be very specific as to what the internal note or reminder needs to be set to. And then go. Oh. So that's just a bunch of different things. I know you can think of better uses, and I hope you do. I'm excited that some of you have made use of internal notes. Any other questions people would like to ask?
Claire, I'm going to use Betsy's example. If she wanted to see what MOs from sales orders that she's made an internal note for, is there a way to export it to a report or some way to see, hey, there's 20 manufacturing orders that haven't been completed yet?
Yeah, I forgot to point this out. Thanks for bringing it up, Larry. Underneath the file thing, there's two internal notes pops here, your internal notes and all internal notes. So if you want to see everybody's internal notes, you can pick this. And if you want to see just your internal notes, the benefit of your internal notes is it shows all your notes across the platform, whether it's attached to an item, to a sales order, a non-conformance, wherever it came from, it's showing all your internal notes. So that would be the best spot for it. And remember, you can also hit the blue bar and do load all to see old notes that may have already been completed. So that's a great thing. You can do export to Excel on your notes. You can do a grid print. You can do those kind of things. But most of the time, this is the biggest thing, if you can at least see all your internal notes across the platform. So you don't have to find which item you put it on. ends. Other questions?
Hey, Claire, this is Mike. I was just going to ask you a quick question. I think you and I already talked about this, about reminders for like in calibration, in the quality side of it, to say, hey, in a month or whatever, what month you got calibrations coming up on this equipment or audits being due at this time. Is this a place to use that, or is there other reminders you're looking at?
Yeah, Daniel and I even reviewed your request today when I was prepping for the discussion because I thought of it. And it's not that you couldn't use internal notes for that. We will probably be recommending you use the email alert function because there's a difference. The email alert will look maybe for a lack of information or a lack of action based on a query, where the automated like internal notes is we want it more based on some action that happened. So you created the sales order, now production needs to do it. You created a new drawing record, so somebody else has to follow up on it. Things like that, where it's somebody did something and therefore now there's a internal note. Where we probably recommend using like the email alerts for saying, hey, based on looking at the data, something should be done. So we looked at it for this, but probably won't use it for that. Other questions, comments?
The other day I was helping a customer and they had asked me if when they do an internal note, if they want to remind themselves, do they also need to assign it to themselves?
No, you don't need to assign it to yourself. If you did assign it to somebody, you do have to do the remind creator checkbox. So if you don't have the assign to filled in, different, so if it's just for you, this can be blank, the assign to. But if you did assign it to somebody else and you want to see it as well, make sure you check the remind creator box for it to pop up on your screen.
Another one I got a lot was, how do I see it once it's marked completed? It just disappeared. But you kind of covered that, how you can right click and load all.
That's the blue bar from active to show all or to show it by date. Great.
So I didn't hear anybody object to the eliminating the time due. Did you?
Okay. No. So sometimes, our good ideas go awry. So, but we like to keep it clean. So if we can eliminate that extra field, I think that'll be helpful.
I think this is good because a lot of our customers, they know about internal notes for just logging a record, but remembering that you can use it as a communication tool to talk to each other inside the company. I don't think a lot of times people remember that option, that it can do that for you.
Right. So yeah, we'll look at that. Well, I sure appreciate those that joined us today. We will be publishing this onto our website, video blog type deal. Please find those via our website, via our YouTube channel. We're going to try to keep getting more information out to people to better communicate what the program can do and how to do things. Again, we want to thank Larry, who's invested in Techno to make these things possible. So thanks everybody for your participation today. Thanks.